We got us a train in the way of getting to church. Man, thanks for overcoming obstacles today and overcoming adversity, and thanks for being here. Man, it's good to be together in our first of two Legathrall worship experiences today. Isn't that exciting? Yeah. It's fun, right? All you Round Rock folks are sitting here going, man, this is early, and you got an extra hour of sleep last night, right? You got an extra hour. Thrall folks, man, thank y'all for doing this week in, week out, being here at this time, making it happen. Thank you so much. And you guys, thanks for being here at 9 o'clock. We know the 11 o'clock is going to be packed like crazy, so thank you so much for being a part of this worship experience so that we create some room, and hopefully we're creating room for people who don't know Jesus. And so hopefully that's what we're doing by you guys being here in the early service today. It's so good to be together. Thanks for making it happen. You know, I'm in a new stage of parenting right now, Rachel and I are. We've just transitioned over to where now we have the majority of our children who are now teens. And so we've been like in the perpetual Groundhog Day of toddlerism for 15 years at this point right now. And now we find ourselves in this transitional stage where we've got teenagers. Anybody feel sorry for me yet? No, you don't feel sorry for me. It's okay. I got some amazing, amazing kids. And you know what's fun is that, see, we've been in Rachel's wheelhouse for 15 years. She's so good with babies and toddlers and preschoolers, and man, she rocks. She's totally out of her element now. And it's awesome because guess what? We're entering into mine. This is like my wheelhouse. You know, this is student pastor back in the day, Danny Cook. I'm like, I can do this in my home now. It's different when they're with you 24/7. Can I just say, it's a little different when they're with you 24/7. It's wonderful and it's amazing. But I will say that there are some times that as light and wonderful and amazing as my children are, they can have a little bit of a dark side every now and then. I know it's hard to believe, but there can be a little bit of a dark side every now and then. You know, and it's like all of us, we all remember those years of parents saying, go clean your room, go do the dishes, do your laundry, do all those things, you know, that were expected as we were growing up. It can kind of sometimes turn a little bit challenging, even in the sense that, you know, I mean, Rachel, she cooks extremely healthy, and oh my goodness, when that food hits the table, sometimes it's just challenging. And you gotta just work that out, right? Get it in your mouth and eat it. Get it done. You know, get it done, right? And 9 times out of 10, it tastes amazingly well and amazing. Anybody experience anything like this at any point in your life? Yeah. This is a remarkable time of life. And so the other day I had an idea. What I was thinking is that if all of us parents join together to create a new practice in our homes, the complaint jar. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what would happen if all of us just put a jar in the middle of our tables? Now this works no matter what age your kids are. This works even if you are an empty nester and your husband's complaining too much, ladies. You just put a little jar in the middle of the table, and every time there's a complaint, it's $1 in the jar. Parents, think about how much of your money you would get back. Isn't that awesome? That would be amazing. Wives, think about, man, bannies, petties, all that good stuff. You know, $1 every time there's a complaint. Wouldn't that be something? Am I the only one that sometimes struggles with this thought process of the difference between I love you but I don't like you very much? Am I the only one? My guess is that you have experienced this. Can I get a hand raised from all you parents that either have experienced that or are experiencing that currently, or know someday you're going to experience that? I love you so much, but I don't like you very much right now. Man, this parenting gig is a mess, but it's amazing, and it's a wonderful mess. But you know what? Adults in this room, teenagers in this room, you know I kid. You know I kid. This is just one of those moments where we kind of all got to look at ourselves and think about, we're kind of hard to love, aren't we? We're kind of hard to like sometimes, aren't we? It's really, really challenging. And if we're not careful, you and I, if we're not careful, we can place conditions on our love. We can start thinking of those conditions for like and transition those over to conditions for love. And that's a game changer. It's a whole nother ball game. Whole nother ball game in that man. Because it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to treat people with love, honor, and respect whenever they kind of seem to take it for granted. Or it may feel like it's taken for granted. It's hard in that moment. It's difficult to treat others with love. Students, when your parents let you down, it's hard to love them in that moment, isn't it? It's hard. Very challenging. Spouses, it's hard in that moment to love. Love is an action in that moment. We got to be careful to be not guilty of placing conditions on the love that we have for the people on this planet. You see, we've been following Jesus from his introduction to the world. We're getting close to the very best part of the story. All the way to his death on the cross. We've been following this journey with him. Because Jesus came. He came to introduce something new to the world. He also came to introduce something new for the world. He came to introduce a new covenant. He came to introduce a new command, a new movement. And Jesus left hints all along the way, didn't he? All along the way, he just left these little hints, these little breadcrumbs all along the way of things like, you've heard it said, but I say. You've heard this said, but I say this. He consistently said that the greatest people choose the back of the line. The greatest people choose the back of the line. He consistently said and taught this upside down way of values that fought the norms of the culture of that day. They still fight the norms of culture today, don't they? It's amazing when you see that. It's timeless. And so let's pick up where we left off last time we were together. As we pick up, Jesus was making his way to Jerusalem. And everybody was just all up in arms, positive and negative, that he was coming to Jerusalem. He was coming for the Passover festival, where the God-fearing people of the day were celebrating Israel's escape, if you will, from slavery. And so as he made his way to Jerusalem, and the religious leaders heard that he was coming, John 11:57 tells us that the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it so that they might arrest him. Of course, it wasn't real hard to find him. It was really easy to find him. The thing that was hard was arresting him. It was very challenging. John 12:12, the great crowd that had come from the festival heard he was on his way. And they were under the assumption that Jesus was coming in order to do something new for the nation of Israel. They had no idea that he was coming to do something new for the entire world, including you and me today. And about that time, when all this excitement was showing up, about that time, the Pharisees were at this place where they didn't know what to do because they knew they couldn't arrest him in public because they were afraid the crowds might riot and everything. And so they were trying to figure out what to do. They were scared to death because they knew he was coming to replace everything that they had in place. And so as a result, they were terrified over what was going on. And then they got their miracle. Then they got their miracle because Judas turned on Jesus. Judas went MIA. Judas went AWOL. In Luke 22:6, we read that he watched for an opportunity to hand Jesus over to them when no crowd was present. Now, while this was going on, while Judas was MIA, Jesus announced to all the people that God was about to establish his new covenant here on this earth. He was about to establish a new covenant with people for all time. And the announcement gave notice for the end, this end to the old covenant with Israel. And the beginning of a new, unconditional, unlimited covenant with all humanity. It's a new relational agreement. This is a good way of thinking about it. This is a new relational agreement between God and humanity. This is a covenant. It's this new relational agreement. And it's going to be completely different than the old one. But there still are terms. There are still terms. Because anytime you have a covenant with another person, there are terms. Think about your wedding. There are terms that were there that apply to this relationship. Now the disciples, they should have been able to see what was coming. They should have been able to see that this was on its way, but they had a hard time with that. The issue is that if we back up months earlier, if we rewind, Jesus had an encounter with the religious leaders, and they were trying to trap him. They were trying to get him. So Matthew chapter 22 gives us insight into this. The Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. They sent their disciples to him and they said, "Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are." Very interesting thing for them to say in that moment. They then proceed to ask Jesus an IRS tax question, in which Jesus does a great job replying to this question. They run away with their tail between their legs, but the issue also is that they maybe were a little impressed with his answer. Maybe just a little like, ooh, Jesus is quick. Next up, the Sadducees, who, as they say, were sad, you see. Boo, I know, it's okay. "Teacher," they said, Moses told us that if a man dies without having children, his brother must marry the widow and raise up offspring for him." Kinsman-redeemer relationship here. In verse 25, "Now there were 7 brothers among us, Jesus. 7 brothers. The first one married and died. And since he had no children, he left his wife to his brother." This then proceeded to happen 6 more times, in which all 7 brothers married the same woman. So when they die and they're in heaven, whose wife is she? That's what they wanted to know. Whose wife is this woman in heaven, God? Or Jesus, who is it? Jesus then responds in a way that blows their mind, and it also showed that they didn't know the Word of God. They didn't know Scripture very well. And so, yet again, the Jewish leadership walked away humiliated, but yet maybe slightly impressed with how Jesus answered. Now, verse 33, when the crowds heard about this interaction, they were astonished at his teaching. And hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees regrouped, and they got together again. One of them, an expert in the law, tested Jesus with this question. He said, "Jesus, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And here it is. This was the moment. This was the golden opportunity. This was that time that Jesus was ready for. And Jesus replied, here's something new. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And then he says this. The second is like it. Now when he says like, so the second is like it. Second only in order. Second only in order. Equal in greatness. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And thus the shift from vertical relationship only to now we have horizontal relationship as well. And this is that moment. This is that new thing. This is that new identity of those that would be known as the way. Those that would be known as the church. Those that would be known someday as Christians. This is the shift. The new terms of the new relational agreement between God and man were on the way. And then Jesus says, all of the law and prophets, all 600 plus laws, all of those and what the prophets spoke about, predicted, they hang on these 2 commandments. Love God and love people. What Jesus was helping them understand in this moment is that this. Your love for God is best illustrated, it's best demonstrated, and it's best authenticated by your love for other people. You can love God all day long, but the proof that you love the Lord your God with everything is how you love others, how you care for others. In fact, here we go. When you think about the Pharisees of that day, you see, the Pharisees found themselves defining neighbor and going, I can love my neighbor as I love myself, because they define neighbor as somebody who's like me. I can love somebody like me all day long, no problem. That's easy. But Jesus redefined neighbor. And Jesus defined it by telling a story. The story that he told was the parable of the Good Samaritan. And Jesus says these words. He defines neighbor as this. A neighbor is anyone from anywhere with a need that you can meet. That's basically what he said. A neighbor is anybody from anywhere with a need that you can meet. And so if we think about the love for God being illustrated, being demonstrated, and being authenticated by our love for others, the love for God is best illustrated by love for others who are nothing like you. It's easy to love people that are like you. It's easy to love people that are like me, that I have lots in common with. It's very easy. But how do we do when we love people that may not even like us? How do you do loving people that don't even like you? They hate your guts. How do you do in that? Does love have limitations in that moment? Does it have conditions in that moment? It's a very interesting question. See, this morning I was reading. So interesting. I love the timing of the Lord. I was reading my Bible plan on YouVersion. And Brian Houston, who's the pastor of a church in Australia, he said these words. He said, if you want your life to be characterized by love in a way that reflects the heart of God to everybody that you meet, pay attention to how you respond to people who make you feel uncomfortable. Oh. You want to know your love for God? Pay attention to how you feel when you're around somebody that makes you uncomfortable. Somebody that has a different political opinion than you have. Somebody that has a different set of standards than you have. Somebody who parents different than you parent. A child, a teenager who thinks about this world in a very different way than you do. How do you feel about them? Whew, where's our love for God in that? If we really want to see where we stand, that's a good filter for us to filter through. And after the Passover meal, Jesus, having replaced Moses as this covenant maker, the lawgiver, he steps into a new role. And Judas, in that moment, is like, I've had enough. He's out. Judas is like, I'm done. That's it. I'm done. I'm out. And so then Jesus proceeds to take the 600 plus thou shouts, those 600 plus thou shalt nots that are there, and he says there's one thing. If you get anything wrong on this earth, there's one thing. There's one term, there's one law for my covenant, not 600 plus. There's one thing. One thing. And church family, if we get anything out of today, this is what we got to get, okay? John 13, 34 through 35. Get on your phone, get in your app, get in your paper Bible, whatever way you do it. Highlight it, mark it, bookmark it. I mean, whatever you got to do, put this here. This is it. If you get anything wrong with this earth, this is what we got to get right. Jesus says, a new command I give you. But now, you can imagine the disciples at this time going, whoa, whoa, whoa. You just said two of them. You just said love God, love people. Now we add the third to this. But the reality is Jesus was not adding a third, but he was simplifying that even more. He was simplifying LGLP down to one thing. This is it. A new command I give you. Love one another. And you can imagine they're kind of going, that's not new, Jesus. It's not, that's been around for a long time. It's not new. He goes, well, I'm not done. As I have loved you, you must love one another. Uh-oh. See, they didn't even know what Jesus was about to do. They didn't realize. See, we on this side, we can look at that and go, whew, that's a whole other ballgame. But see, Jesus is sitting there, having dessert, having coffee after dinner, hanging out with his buddies, and he's saying, Matthew, you remember how much I love you? Hey, Peter, what about you? John? Drew? Brian? Holly? Darren? You guys remember how much? Luke, you remember? Remember how much Jesus loves you? Yeah, right? You know how much Jesus loves you. I know. Devin knows how much Jesus loves you. He feels it in his home. A new command I give you, love one another. Love one another. As I have loved you, you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you're my people. Everyone will know you're my disciples if you love one another. Not if you love Jesus. Ooh, what? People will know that you are a follower of Christ, not if you love Jesus, not if you love God. They will know you are Christ's follower if you love people, if you love your neighbor, if you love your coworker, If you love that person that cheats. If you love that person, whatever, fill in the blank, the one that's hard for you to love. Your love for God is best manifest in your love for people. That's where it comes down. And so we look at Jesus' way, this way to life. We look at this, and there's no question his way is a whole lot less complicated than the old way. A whole lot less complicated. But my goodness, how much more demanding is it? So much more demanding, because you know what? If life is defined by what we read in the Bible in the Old Testament, we can find a loophole in anything, right? I mean, just look at the education system. You teenagers, you can find a loophole in anything. We're smart. I mean, if there's a rule to be broken or bent or kind of skirted a little bit, we got that. That's easy. There is nothing to. You give 600 rules, we'll figure out how to get through that. That's really, really easy. But Jesus' new covenant closes all of those loopholes. Every single one of them. When you filter it through unconditional love, when you filter it through unlimited love, it closes up all of those loopholes. Because we usually know what love requires, don't we? We usually know what happens. Andy Stanley says it this way. He says, every New Testament imperative is simply an application of Jesus' new covenant command. So everything you read in the New Testament about what Jesus says, how we live, it's just a clarification for us. It's a clarifier for the covenant command to love one another as Christ loves you. This is a whole nother game. This is a whole nother ballgame. Jesus says, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay one's life down for his enemies. To lay one's life down for your aunt that talks bad about you behind your back. To lay one's life down for those you get to see this Thanksgiving in your family that you can't stand. And you know they can't stand you. Greater love has no one than this, that you lay your life down for your friends. You lay your life down for people. Ephesians 4:32. See, the great missionary and apostle Paul, he got it. He figured it out. And he saw what we oftentimes miss, because we look for the loopholes. We're like, man, Jesus, I know I'm supposed to love them, but you remember last Christmas? I know I'm supposed to love them. They still owe me money. I know I'm supposed to love them. Paul says, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other. Not because the Bible tells me so. That's not why. Forgiving each other just as in Christ God forgave you. As you sit here today and receive forgiveness, that's why we give forgiveness. Because Jesus did it. Why in the world should we be patient and kind to people on this earth? Well, Paul, in 1 Corinthians 13:4, it's because love is patient. It's because love is kind. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. He writes to the church in Philippi. He says, in your relationships with one another, so relationships, right? Relationships are hard. They're complicated because people just hack you off, don't they? They're just hard. You hack a bunch of people off too, just for the record. It's hard. Well, here we go. So how do we know what to do in our relationships? Well, Philippians 2:5, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. Aren't you glad he didn't have conditions on his love for you? He never would have crawled up on that cross if it was based on the conditional love of me and my return of that love for him. He never would have done it. Have the same mindset of Christ Jesus. And then he writes to the church at Ephesus, he says, follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us. This is it. This is it. Jesus' new covenant command. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. That's the mark of the new covenant. You want to know how we're doing in this life? Just filter it through how you feel when you're around people that are not like you. And that'll tell us everything we need to know about how far we've got to go with the conditions that we tend to place on love. And always evaluating what Christ has done for us. What God did when he sent Jesus to this earth. and the fact that that love, that is the definition of unconditional love. And so as we look through this window of life, and we're seeing this first century, here's the thing. It works. It works. Because this mark of the new covenant in the first century, as the people began living this out, and they began loving unconditionally, as they began doing this, it was appalling to the people around them that were all about victory and conquest. Worshiping those things, it was appalling to all of those people. But man, it sure was appealing to a whole bunch of people too. It was appealing to a lot of people. And in the end, this new relationship covenant, this new way of doing things, it became contagious. And consequently, this little bitty group of people, little bitty group of people, Jesus' first century church, smaller than most churches on this planet, they should never have survived. They began to multiply. As they lived out this, they were fueled by a single command to love as Christ loved them. They were fueled by that single command. Man, can you imagine being there that night? Right after dinner, listening to Jesus. Can you imagine it? What a night. There's a new covenant that's in place. There's this new command. They then make their way to Gethsemane. They're just going to spend some time praying together, celebrating this night, and just looking forward to what is to come. And then the cops showed up. And as the cops showed up, you saw the disciples run like a bunch of teenagers at a kegger. You know what I'm talking about? You see them? They're gone, man. They're out of here. They're done. Jesus was arrested. And when Jesus was tried, those same disciples, they didn't come forward as witnesses. And when Jesus was taken to the Roman governor, it certainly meant only one thing. And we'll get there next week. Father, we thank you so much for today. Gosh, thank you for loving us the way you do. You are so amazing. Will you help us to follow your lead and to love others the same as you love us? Will you save us from ourselves? Will you allow us to put aside limitations and conditions? Will you help us to love, to see people, and to love people as you do? Father, we can't do it on our own. We need you. We know you can do it through us, and so, Lord, we ask all of these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.
In the next couple of moments, you have an opportunity to respond